Well, Your Honour, I was going to wait for a specific question to object to, but you may as well hear the objection so that when the questions come, you're in a position to deal with them. Yes. First of all, I object to questions that are designed to cause the witness to incriminate himself, and we are now dealing with questions of perjury. I object to it in principle, but there are a couple of points I'd like to make. One, if he has committed perjury, there is a record. And the record will compare what he said on the 24th with what he said today, and then objectively, if there's been perjury, there's been perjury. What we're going through now is a situation of haranguing a witness and arguing questions of interpretation of wording and relating to questions. But what I want to also put to you is what we are actually doing here. This inquest is supposed to find out what happened on the unfortunate day in Yundu, and to some extent it has been broadened, and I'm not going to argue the question of broadening, but it's been broadened into questions of why, and that has gone into questions of institutional racism. This witness wasn't there. He's been asked various things about what happened, but he's part of a very small group who appear to be taking the brunt of the question of racism in the force. He attempted to file a statement dealing with this some time ago. It was rejected. There's never been a suggestion that he has behaved towards an Indigenous person in a racist manner, but this seems to me to be moving away from the objects and the objectives of this inquest. You, Your Honour, and my learned friends for you have made it clear you're trying to streamline this and get this over and done with. We're going down a road that has nothing to do with completing this. But all of that is subsidiary to the principal point, and that is I object to him being asked questions in which he may incriminate himself.
And you're asking for a certificate?
I wasn't asking for a certificate. I was asking for the questions not to be put. Nobody's offered a certificate. If you're offering a certificate, then I'll take instructions as to whether a certificate answers the question. It hasn't been mentioned in the down.
I thought that you were taking instructions to be able to address those issues, but in any event, yes, Mr. Coleridge.
Can I just first correct something that is untrue, which is that the statement provided by Sergeant Bowles was not added to the brief. It is at item 7-7BB.
Sorry, if I could just correct my learned friend, I don't mean to interrupt him. There was an attempt made previously to put in a statement and it was rejected. The one he refers to is there. Well, I'll dig it up later and I won't interrupt further. Yes.
Well, we call for a copy of that statement. I'm not aware of any such statement. Can I just... Let's take a step back and identify why the evidence of this witness is so significant. Constable Rolfe was a member of the IRT. Constable Rolfe was deployed as a member of the IRT on the 9th of November. Constable Rolfe killed Kumanjayi dead. I have suggested to this witness on the last occasion that it was his responsibility to determine who was suitable and that he failed to discharge that responsibility, and that had he properly discharged that responsibility, Constable Rolfe would not have been deployed and would not have killed Kumanjayi. The nexus with the death is visceral. I will be asking you in submissions at the conclusion of the inquest to consider Sergeant Boland's answers, particularly in respect of Mr. Rolfe, very carefully. The cross-examination today has nothing to do with establishing that the witness has perjured himself. It is an orthodox attack on the witness's credibility on the basis that the answers he gave before he knew that Sergeant Constable Rolfe was going to throw the TRG under the bus on the 26th were untrue and could only have been knowingly untrue. In my respectful submission, there is a direct connection with the cause and circumstances of Kumanjayi Walker's death. That's what I'm seeking to investigate. If there is an application for a certificate, that's one matter. But I don't understand there to be such an application.
I think the record might not be here.
Your Honour, I rise just on a question of law because there are two matters taking place here. Our learned friend Mr Coleridge has said to you that he's not seeking to explore overtly the question of whether the witness has engaged in perjury, but he wants to ask further questions about it. Whether the witness has engaged in perjury or will engage in perjury is an objective matter. And under Section 38 of the Coroner's Act, subsection 3, even if a person is given a certificate, it does not protect them on a prosecution for perjury. So that's part of the overall scenario in which presumably to which Mr Suttner is giving consideration, discussing with his client as to not so much whether to ask Your Honour for a certificate which would not assist him in relation to perjury, but to consider whether to make submissions to you about the issue of a certificate aside, you should provide protection to this witness against incriminating himself when a certificate will not help him.
Do you wish to respond, Mr. Coleridge or Mr. Sutton?
Only to say that I'm not aware of what protection you can give the witness. That may be a shortcoming in my knowledge of the law, but I'm not aware of how you can. And if there is a way, I would be interested in putting it to my client. At the moment I can't, and at the moment I can only object to you forcing him to answer questions which may incriminate him, especially when it's whatever Mr. Coleridge said, with great respect. If Mr. Bowen, Sergeant Bowens, I'm not conceding he's lied, he answered the questions. But if there's a question about the 2015 or 2012 NUGDA awards, how that's directly relatable at all to the unfortunate events which everybody regrets having happened, I cannot see any relationship, and I urge you not to allow this tangential inquiry, which is just fraught with objections, to proceed.
I'm going to take it question by question.
Then do you want, I just getting clarity, do you want me to object question by question, or are you going to take control?
I'll hear the question, and if it's one of the ones that you object to, you can let me know, and if I need to hear further, I will.
Can I please have document 1 again? And it's at page 94 of the PDF, the court order's PDF, and 5027 of the transcript for those following along. I'll take it one step by step and pause and allow my friend to take the objection.
I have to zoom that in.
5027 of the transcript and 94 of its PDF.
5027.
Can you make it bigger, Patrick?
Just get there. Let me scroll down, please. All right. Up. Great. You were examined by Mr. Matt Derry for Naja on the 23rd of February. Do you recall that?
If you say so.
I suggest to you that someone from Naja asked you some questions.
Yes.
You were asked about your use of the word in the text with Mr. Rolfe.
Correct.
You were asked the question, now, you say that this, you're surprised to see this, but are you suggesting that this is the first time that you've used this kind of language with another officer? Yes. First question, do you agree that you were asked that question and you gave that answer?
Is it written down there? I will look.
It's in the rules.
Yes, I can read that.
And you agree that you were asked the question and gave that answer?
Yes.
Based on your 10 years of participation in the annual TRGL awards, that was untrue.
I object.
Your Honour, if the position by my friend is that it is an objective matter for Your Honour to assess the truth or untruthfulness of this, Your Honour might uphold the objection under section 38 and determine that it's not expedient in the administration of justice to compel the witness to answer, on the understanding that this is his opportunity to answer it if he wants to, and that the counsel assisting team will be submitting that Your Honour ought to make findings adverse to the witness on a comparison of his answer and his knowledge of the TRG award. So on that basis, if that is the position my firm takes, it would certainly be open to you to uphold the objection.
And that is indeed the position I take, is that you look at it, is that this doesn't help. You've got the information in front of you. Yes.
Your Honour, quickly,
Yes.
if the objection is relevance, you should overrule it. If the objection is my client refuses to answer on the grounds that the answer might tend to incriminate me, then Your Honour may indeed uphold the objection.
It is the latter in respectful submission.
And it is the latter, Mr.
The
Sutton.
objection is both, but if you uphold it on the ground of self-incrimination, then you've upheld it, and then the rest becomes irrelevant at this stage. Well, if you uphold the objection, we don't need to argue relevance. We'll argue, Your Honour.
I think I understand the situation, but I'm just going to give everybody an opportunity to make sure we are very clear. So Mr. Sutner,
Let me just say this. I had a twofold objection. But if you uphold one of the folds, then you will have expressed no view on the other. It will be open to you to deal with the other at a later stage. But if it's impermissible because it's self-incriminatory, that stops it for now.
I uphold the objection on the basis of self-incrimination only.
As it pleases you. So it pleases.
Your Honour, I'll move away from the consideration of the transcript on the last occasion. Sergeant Bowens, what's your relationship with Gary Joy?
Gary Joy, I've known Gary Joy for about 23 years.
Very close friend. Picked him up from the airport last night.
Correct. Said hi to you.
And what's your relationship with Mr. Rolfe today?
Close friend.
One more reason.
I'll come to it. Could you introduce Mr. Joy and Mr. Rolfe?
No, I don't think I did.
Shortly before the commencement.
Well, mate. Well, I don't know, I can't remember.
Shortly before the commencement of the inquest, did you meet with Mr. Joy and Mr. Rolfe socially?
At which inquest? This one or the one before? Or
I think this is the only inquest.
I mean, sorry, the sittings I'm referring to.
Sorry, the beginning of the inquest in September 2022.
Did we meet? I meet with Kerry Joy every day, and so I can't remember if I had a meeting with Zach, so I really can't remember.
Can you recall a meeting with Mr. Joy and Mr. Rolfe at Mr. Joy's house?
Prior to the first one? No, I can't recall. It could have happened, I can't recall.
At any time?
I think we had a barbecue there at some stage, from memory.
At that barbecue, yourself and Mr. Joy spoke to Mr. Rolfe about the TRG awards, did you not?
I can't recall the exact conversations.
It's possible you did.
It is possible.
To your knowledge, was it yourself or Mr. Joy or both who first told Mr. Rolfe about these matters?
Which matters?
The TRG awards?
I believe I've had a conversation with.
I think there is not. Where, that is not, who might have told the role something that
Well, it might help me understand where the information came from, or it might not, but I'm going to permit the question.
Well, may I just ask what the relevance is of where Mr. Rolfe got the information? He's got the information, it's before you. How does this relate to how the events that happened on the fateful day?
Well,
So that's not relevant.
sorry, no, Mr. Coronial.
If you want, I can explain. Mr. Rolfe's evidence, when he ultimately, after many years of resistance, gave evidence in February of this year, was that out of the goodness of his heart, in effect, he was uncovering quote-unquote truths about the Northern Territory Police Force.
I think this is not sufficient, to be honest. For the goodness of
Mr. Coleridge, if we could just go to the facts.
Your Honour, the timing of Mr. Rolfe's knowledge in circumstances where he might have known about these things for many years and chose only to disclose them very late in this would be relevant to Your Honour's assessment of Mr. Rolfe's credibility and his motivations for sharing that information.
I'm more interested in his motivations when he was carrying out his duties, and it may be relevant to that, so I will allow the questions.
Reframe then and focus on that period.
Thank you.
At the time that Mr. Rolfe was a police officer, did you ever have conversations with him, without Mr. Joy, about the TRG awards?
I can't recall.
Subsequently, after he ceased to be a police officer?
I believe I have had a conversation with him regarding that.
When was that?
I cannot recall.
Last year?
I cannot recall. It probably was in relation to my text and the link between the two. That would have been
What was said?
I can't recall.
So are you completely unable to say whether the conversation occurred 2 years ago, 1 year ago, this year?
It's been a crazy couple of years with information and everything. I cannot recall the time I was exactly right about those awards.
And who else was there?
You're telling me about a situation where I don't remember, so
Discussed.
I can't remember what was discussed. We discussed lots of things. Like I said, this year have been many discussions regarding this case, the police, just about everything. To narrow it down to what was said, I really cannot recall. I can't even recall the time we had the barbecue, so I've been to many places, spoke to many people.
Do you recall the
Barbecue. Or is it a general question?
I think that was a general question.
That was directed
Well,
at barbecue.
Oh, was it? Okay, thanks for clarifying
That's the
that,
problem
Mr.
with-
Sutton.
Yes.
doing my best to follow Your Honour's instructions and my leaders.
So we're talking about the barbecue now?
We're talking about the barbecue. Can you recall there being discussion of the truths?
No, I can't remember.
Do you know what I'm talking about, the truths?
Yes, sir.
Okay, what is the truths?
As I said in my statement, it's a book where stories or quotes were written down that were perceived to be funny at the time, or incidences to be read out later, or just for prosperity, I guess.
In your statement, your most recent statement, you say that the word we've been discussing is not used by frontline Northern Territory Police Force members.
That's correct.
Okay. And that any officers who, it would cause any officer who heard it, their ears would prick up.
Yes.
And I think you go so far as to say that they might be subject to some kind of violent recrimination or threat.
That's what I said. Yes.
There must have been a lot of punch-ons in the TRG.
You said you were referring to Alice Springs Police Station.
I was referring to frontline police.
No, I
officers.
was answering in front one. As Zach said in his evidence that it was used in Alice Springs Police Station, and that's what I answered to the statement.
So you were distinguishing there between the TRG and the Alice Springs Police Station?
Correct.
Okay. You disagree with Mr. Rolfe that word was used commonly in the Alice Springs Police
Yes.
Station? Okay. Those are my questions.
Mr. Bolton?
Was Meacham King at any of these TRG award nights when you were present?
Yes, please, sir.
Suggested that none of the awards had any connotation to race and that the awards were not meant to be offensive. Do you agree or disagree with the proposition that none of the awards that you've been discussing in your evidence had any connotation to race?
It's definitely something, as I said in my statement.
They did, didn't
Yes,
they?
yes.
Yeah, and the clear delineation or the clear link with the Noogood Award was that it was Aboriginal characteristics that suggested that the person nominated might be awarded the prize.
Yeah, that was the inception of the award, how it started. But
So hygiene, or lack of hygiene, was regarded as an Aboriginal characteristic
not as a whole race, but it's specific to some people.
that was put in the terms of the race, wasn't it?
Well, it's not, but it's obviously referred to.
That's why it's
Aboriginal.
racist, isn't it?
Well, yes,
Because not all Aboriginal people
100%.
are unhygienic, nor all white people.
100%.
But you understand, don't you, that the characterisation of a whole race of people as having the same characteristic is what marks racism.
But we've made characteristics in this court of.
Do you agree with the
Can you
question?
just finish?
Do you agree with the question,
I
Sergeant?
don't agree that there's the whole race perceives that, but that's not. It was just some of the people we deal with.
Was Acting Assistant Commissioner James Gray Spence present at any of these awards, to your knowledge, with you?
I can't remember actually seeing him there, but it would not be a difficult situation.
What do you say to this proposition? That the New Gooder Award has never had any connection to Indigenous issues?
Who said that, sorry?
Your Honour, this has been killed by Mr. Coleridge. Are we going to go through exactly the same thing with each person who examines him? Object to the repetition.
Mr. Bolton, he has conceded that the award is a racist
Yeah,
award, or
all
at
right.
least its inception was.
If the court pleases. may I then ask you more specifically about some of the terms that you referred to in your statement, the recent one, and in particular to the term half-caste.
Yes.
When do you think it was that police that you worked with stopped using the term half-caste?
I can only speak, well, it's been a while. I can just recall an incident when I was taking a statement from a lady, and I think it would have been before I joined TRG. That's when I was used to take statements. And I was describing an offender, and I referred to half-caste, and I distinctly remember it. She said, I'm offended by that term, and I went, the term we use. And made me think, and I went, oh, that's fair enough. And from that point on, I never used it. And,
What about your colleagues?
well, I really can't speak
Well,
them
speak
too
of what
much.
you've heard.
Not a great deal. I'm sure it was used, yes. I'm sure it was used, but I can't recall any incident, but it wasn't widespread.
When did it die out?
Sorry?
You suggest that it's died out.
Correct.
As a term when? Approximately.
Oh,
Last
well,
2 years, 5 years, 10 years?
we haven't used it since I've come back to Alice Springs in 2014. And I left in 2004 and went to that specialist section, so.
What about the term gin jockey? In your experience, when you heard people you worked with use the term gin jockey, what was the reaction amongst the people who heard it?
Well, we're talking a period probably 2000 and 2004, which is when I first started.
And what was the reaction to people when they heard someone talk
Oh,
about a gin jockey?
20 something years ago, I can't recall.
Was it positive, negative? Was there some reaction, no reaction?
Well,
Was
it
it taken
was
as
with a
part of
term,
normal parlance?
I'd only be guessing, and it was 20 years ago, 23 years ago.
Okay. What about the term coon? When, if ever, have you ever heard the term coon used in your policing apart from these awards?
I've heard members of the public use it. I haven't heard it in the police station. It's just not a, like I said in my statement, it's not a term that we, it's just not used.
We've seen your use of the term on the message that was exchanged between you and Mr. Rolfe. Were you a user of social media to communicate with your police colleagues during work or outside of work hours?
Social media, I text people.
Forget about text, but for instance, Snapchat, Signal.
Speak to people in Signal sometimes.
About work issues.
Well, I haven't been at work for a while, so generally not. And I can't recall the exact conversations that I've had on phones. I think it's a reach.
When you were working in Alice Springs Police Station, were you aware that some of your colleagues were communicating by Facebook Messenger, Snapchat, Signal, and other forms, similar platforms?
Can you find colleagues? There's a
Police
couple
officers.
hundred people
Police
over there.
officers.
Yeah, there's 300 or 400 people over there. I don't know what they're all doing.
Well, were you aware of any of them in groups that were communicating in groups?
Recently, I've been known of one, but
Which one are you talking about?
there's one that's in the media, I think.
The one that was in the media since last week. So, do you know Sergeant Healy?
Yes.
Were you aware when you were working as a police officer that he was involved in sending messages around on a social media platform with his colleagues?
No.
You've made a clear distinction in your statement between the use of what you would accept to be racist language when people are in private, on the one hand.
Is this in my statement, sorry?
Yeah, I think so.
I think I used derogatory comments.
Derogatory, okay, well, let's call them derogatory comments.
Yes.
As I see the logic in your statement, you don't see a problem with people making derogatory comments about the people they police in private.
I didn't say I don't have a problem
But
with
do you
it.
have a problem with it?
Well, you've got to look at things case by case. People have private conversations. Everybody in this boardroom's had a private conversation, which I'm not privy to. Neither are you. So,
What do you
how do
see?
you judge what private conversations are, and how do I judge what they are?
Well, that might be a very important point. Conversations had between police officers at a police station when they're on duty, when they're exercising functions and powers as police officers, they cannot truly be regarded as
How do you know they're at police stations?
and irrelevant to
Putting-
policing duties, can they?
Putting a lot of information in there which is not known. This information, conversations can happen anywhere. You're assuming they're on duty at the station. Who knows all that? Could be at home with their wife talking about what happened during the day.
So
Private conversations.
So
That's,
if a police officer is on duty, can they talk in a manner that you would regard as racially inappropriate?
can they talk?
Should they talk racially inappropriately when they're on duty?
Not in an open place where other people can hear.
What
But
about when they're in private, when they're in the corner of a police station,
that's what I
when no one
said.
else can hear except for the 2 or 3 sets of ears that are listening to them being racist? Is that okay, Sergeant Barrows?
You're telling me about things I don't know.
I'm not
I don't know what they say,
I'm after
and it's a
your-
private
your
conversation.
opinion. Do you think that it's okay?
I don't agree with any racial things in the police station, if that's what it answers.
So it's not appropriate. Do you agree?
Any racial words is, I think we've established it's not appropriate.
It shouldn't have to.
Private conversations, how do you know?
It's not a question of how you know, it was a question of
Correct, Your
should
Honour.
that racist language be used by
Racist
police
language in the
on
police
duty?
station.
Do you see that it has the capacity to affect a person's attitudes generally?
Your Honour, this has been dealt with, again, ad nauseam, not even last time, but the previous time with every witness. We've heard this, and the witness has said it should never be used.
This is the next link, though, Mr Sutner, and I'm going to allow that link because I need to understand what Sergeant Bowden's views were and what his views are now, and
Yes.
whether they've changed at any point in time.
Do you think that if police officers use racist language to each other, that racist language, even in private, might affect their attitudes?
What do you mean racist language?
Anything that disregards Aboriginal people,
Well,
language which ascribes characteristics to the whole race of people who are Aboriginal.
that's
That's a start.
that's
So do you want to carve out a subset of such language as being acceptable, or do you accept the whole lot of it as being unacceptable?
what I said in my statement.
What's your answer to the
I said,
question?
I'm trying to answer if you let me. I said derogatory comments. Derogatory comments could be anybody. Every police officer in Australia makes a derogatory comment because we work with people, criminals. black, white, brindle, everybody. So derogatory comment is regarding about what someone's done, their behaviour. That is what I'm talking about. Whether they are racist or not, I do not know. So whether you want to draw a link between describing an offender who has done something heinous to somebody, killed a child, and the police officer said that's a horrible thing, then is that racist?
That's
I
not
don't know.
racist, is it? That's not racist. It's
But you're
clearly
talking
not
about
racist.
private conversations between police officers.
Mr. Valens, you can set up this wall of words if you want, but I withdraw that. Listen please to this question. If a police officer used a derogatory comment about an Aboriginal person and described them as less than any other, I'll start again. If a derogatory comment focuses on the person's race and the derogatory inference is that they are unhygienic because of race.
That I've already answered that question. Racism is the comments shouldn't be used.
So do you think that such comments might influence the attitude of people who hear the comments made?
Are we talking about what happens in Alice Springs? You mentioned
We're talking
hygienic.
about what happens in police stations in the Northern Territory,
Sorry,
including Alice.
You just made reference to hygienic, which is that instance in TRG, which we were talking about 20 years ago. So that's why I was just clarifying. Of course, any sort of racial words are inappropriate.
I think racist words expressed in private by police to police have the capacity to influence police officers' attitudes in their duties.
It's a big call to make, and it's on so many circumstances. I really wouldn't like to.
You don't want to answer that question because it's too
I haven't
big,
got all the information.
too
I
big.
get
I think it's a question where you need psychological evidence, sociological evidence. He says he can't answer the question, but what he has said is that it's unacceptable. Wherever it is, it's unacceptable.
I don't think you can take it any further.
No, I
Sergeant Valens.
think Your Honour is right. I'll step away from that. How long have you been on sick leave?
So nearly
What
a year
has
and a
this
half.
got to do with this inquest?
I'm not sure, but I assume Mr. Bolton will make it relevant.
Perhaps he can identify to you where he's going so that we'll know that it's relevant.
Can you assure me of its relevance, Mr. Bolton?
Yes, Your Honour.
Thank you. I'll allow the question.
When did you first go on sick
It was just before. I had a few weeks off before the murder trial. After it would have been mid-year, 23 or something.
leave? July 2022.
Yeah.
When do you hope to return to work?
That's something that I'm dealing with at the moment.
Have you discussed your sick leave with any of your colleagues?
What is this with I object? What has this got to do with this inquest? Are we getting into, Sergeant, are we going to get into what's actually wrong with him? Why he's off leave?
I don't think so, but certainly management of behaviour by police officers within the police service is an issue in relation to this inquest, and whether or not it's effective or not is an issue in this inquest. So if that's the area that Mr. Bolton's exploring,
Well,
A number of the members of the IRT have given evidence in this inquest on sick leave, or sick leave, that pertinent times. Have you discussed the idea of sick leave being an appropriate mechanism for any of your colleagues to deal with the pressure that they're feeling from the issues that are being explored?
I tell my members if a situation occurs and they feel they cannot perform their functions or they under stress, anxiety, then police force, we have the sick leave to use it.
How beneficial do you think it is that there is essentially no limit to sick leave?
Well, there is a limit. It's been changed. In my instance, I've been 23 years, and you can probably count the days I've had off on a hand. I've had multiple attempts on my life, and turn up to work the next day. So, what's happened to me regarding this court and the trial has had a different effect, and has a different effect on a lot of police officers as well. We can deal and cope with what we see in front of us. We're trained and equipped to do that, and but things that are out of our control and that we see unjust is it. Like I said in my statement, it's a hard pill to swallow. That's what we take.
The unjust aspects of all of this is what?
The unjust aspects of this start from the initial arrest of Zach Rolfe for murder after 4 days, with no investigation, multiple influences from outside agencies, government, ICAC. That the corruption is that's even without the court case where statements and evidence are manipulated, withheld. As a police officer, we live for the law, and people who are of a superior rank or misuse of the law, it's very hard to take. And I myself have been morally compromised. And also during while this was going on, I also received multiple internal charges over a very minor incident, which I was punished and sent to a different area, and that dragged on for over 2 years.
Sergeant, the death of Kumanjayi Walker has not been central to your concerns. It's the reaction to the death by government, police hierarchy in the Aboriginal community.
It encompasses everything that I just said.
Okay, that's all I was trying to say.
Mr. Mullins?
Thank you, Your Honour. I didn't notify that I had some questions, but my clients have asked me to ask a few questions. I'll be less than 10 minutes. Sergeant Bowens, my name is Mullins. I appear on behalf of the Brown family. Just a couple of questions. You said in your evidence at about 10:40, and correct me if I'm wrong, this is just my note, you said when you first came to Alice Springs, you came to make a difference.
Correct.
And you said you were conscious of the words, terminology and behaviour that you used. And you're extremely careful of what you did.
That's correct.
And you wouldn't use, you referred to that type of language to a junior member.
That's correct.
Do we infer from that that you understood that the words you use make a difference?
Correct.
And you understood that the words you used to fellow officers and to junior officers might have an impact upon them.
Correct.
And it might cause them to change their behaviour toward other people.
It has the potential to do a lot of things that you could draw that assumption.
Yeah. Now, did you also understand that it might cause people either consciously or unconsciously to act differently?
You're putting a lot of emphasis on words. There are so many other factors which contribute to adjusting someone's behaviour. Role modelling as a police officer is your actions and what you do on a daily basis. So while a word may have some effect, I would say it also would have to be backed up by actions and probably over a prolonged period of time.
Now, did you work out the things we've been talking about by yourself, or did you receive education from the Northern Territory Police Force about that?
Oh, sorry, I just did that first part.
The impact that derogatory words could have on you, could have on a person's behaviour, did you work that out yourself, or have you been taught that? Have you had courses?
I don't recall any courses, but it's just something that you know.
All right. The second thing I wanted to ask you about briefly is you asked many questions about the TRG awards, and I don't want to spend too long on them, but just one thing, can I ask you, do you know where they originated?
Where they originated?
Yes.
The Nugget or the whole lot of awards?
Both.
Given the answer from that search in Lara from 2006 was the Nugget, they were around before that for several years probably.
And do you know who was responsible for commencing them or designing them?
The Nugget or all of them? Who started it initially?
Yes.
I have no idea.
In the time period that you're involved, do you know who was responsible for maintaining them?
Generally the sergeant and sergeants.
And were you one of those sergeants?
I was a sergeant in TRG later on, but I was not involved in the awards.
Did anybody during the course of the presentations of these awards complain that they shouldn't be carried out? Were there ever any ACPOs or Indigenous people present when they were handed out?
Not that I'm aware of, but several members of the TRG, as we do live in the Northern Territory, I've had partners which are Indigenous or relatives, so it's all part of living in the Territory.
You said that you felt compromised morally by what has unfolded since the charges that were laid against Zachary Rolfe.
Correct.
Did you feel compromised morally when you were presented with the Nugadua Award?
Totally two different situations. One's drunken, misconceived humour, and one is obviously slightly different.
Now, my clients are the family of Kumanjayi Walker, and can you understand they might find this information distressing?
100%.
Do you have any remorse?
I've seen those awards and I do have remorse, for sure. And we all learn and we all participate in things which at the time seemed appropriate or funny, or maybe you just turn a blind eye to the things. But in essence, they were just stupid jokes, and that's the way we saw it, and we were just having a laugh at ourselves. And it was a way that the section back then just dealt with the modern the pressures of policing. We 25 buck bloke insult or hurt Indigenous people. And quite the opposite. Several officers in there we have formed very great relationships with Indigenous people and served extensively in Indigenous communities, and well renowned in those communities.
So your answer to my question is whether you have remorse. Is the answer yes?
Yes.
Thank you, Your Honour.
Any other questions? Mr Abbott?
Yes.
No one else stood up.
No, thank you.
We've been given some documents. I'm now referring to the prosecution. I'm afraid your Honour has to nothing. referring to, I was referring to 1838, this section was 2019. More, I appreciate that. Second page of that. The presenter notes.
We've just got to go back to the original brief. We just take a moment to get them up. I think we just show that to Miss Walls and she'll recognise it.
I know you want that 2019 awards, I think.
No,
Are you aware?
Alice Springs.
The 2019 awards, we've got a copy of what it said in the notes. And it reads, and continuing on from our story, by the way, the 2019 TRG awards, we can assume were held in December 2019, shortly after the event of the 9th of November 2019. So, the presenter's notes for the award that we read, and continuing on from our story, our detective would not these members were embracing our new culture in a professional way, and maybe they were just taking the piss of Kumanjayi Kershaw's strategy to become the next AFP commissioner. Have you ever heard that Kershaw, I think, was until early 2019, the commissioner of the non-technical police?
Have I? What's I heard?
Kershaw was, I
Yeah,
think,
he was, yes.
and he shortly became the AFP police commissioner.
Correct.
Have you ever heard of him being referred, had you heard of him in 2019 office, I'm dealing with December 2019 to today, have you ever heard of him being referred to as Kumanjayi Kershaw's?
No.
In relation to the PRG awards of 2021, there's a reference, I didn't take it to the actual document, so there's a reference in those awards in several places to a PRG officer called Mitch, and his surname there, but I won't mention it here. He's referred to as Mitch the Racist. Do you know the person I'm referring to?
Yeah, I know. Person Mitch.
Yeah. The surname isn't in this document, so I won't mention it.
That document can come down.
Was he, when you knew him, did you know him as Mitch the Racist?
I didn't know him as that, no.
You never heard of him as Mitch the Racist?
No.
Oh, Mr. Sutton.
Thanks, I'm getting accustomed to being cut out of these proceedings, so.
Oh, Mr. Sutton,
Yeah.
I'm interested in the questions that you have to answer.
Sergeant Bones, point was made about the fact that Constable Rolfe spoke of racist language being used at the Alice Springs police station, whereas you had said it wasn't used to your knowledge. Can you explain that?
The Alice Springs Police Station, as I mentioned, has got over 300 members, 5 patrol groups, which would be the tax area of where he was working. as you can appreciate, it's a lot of people. And being a 24-hour station with 3 shifts, a lot of patrol groups had no interaction with each other at all. Well, some worked, some slept. So it's hard to say what other people are saying and different social groups within the station.
Yes. But in your experience, with your patrol group, the words weren't used.
Correct.
And people knew. Whatever they may wish, no suggestion that they may wish to use racist words, they were not appropriate. Now, my learned friend Mr. Bolton asked you about the use of the word half-caste. Could you tell the coroner when that word was used, in what context and for what purpose and by whom it was used?
It was generally used to describe an offender and
For purpose of identification.
personal identification,
Yes.
during running a statement. As I said, it would distinguish between the levels or description of the offender. That was early on, and I mentioned the scenario where I got pulled up on it and I learned from that. We generally use different terms now.
But for instance, did victims who approached the police use that terminology?
It was, Indigenous people also use that terminology, and amongst probably less favourable terminology as well.
And can you tell Her Honour, in broad terms, how has it been many years since you've heard that term used?
Yes, it's been many years. As mentioned, my career is from 2004 as GDs, and returning to GDs in 14.
Yes. Now, the awards that have taken up this morning's hearing, did you ever apply for one of those awards?
No.
Do you know anybody who did?
Apply or
Apply to win one of these awards?
I don't know that anyone did. Was there an application process?
Well, that's
you
exactly
could-
the point I'm making, Your Honour,
Well, then
is that it never happened.
Well, I don't think there was an application
Yeah,
process, in
it
my
was-
understanding.
It was poking fun at somebody.
Yes, correct.
Correct. Now, you've made it clear that with the benefit of years of experience and hindsight, the nature of the relationship between the wording of the awards and Indigenous people was unacceptable.
Correct.
And it has been many years since you have had any part at all in these events.
Yes, when I left Darwin, they stayed in Darwin. When I started IIT, I did not instigate any awards,
Yes.
without any awards.
Now, would you tell Her Honour, in the context of life as a policeman in the Northern Territory, what that was like and what was the purpose of the awards, not all of which had racist connotations?
There's been much talk of venting, coping mechanisms. Police officers all have those. What they do and how they deal with what they do every day, dealing with the tragic events, what we have to deal with. It's how those officers will deal with that is on an individual thing. Some people get angry, some people are depressed, some people turn to violence. Unfortunately, quite a few officers turn to suicide. The TRG at that stage, we turned to humour. Although, as we've established, it's inappropriate humour. But we laughed at things that were inappropriate to desensitise, I guess, what we saw and dealt with on a daily basis. We thought it was a harmless way to deal with what we have to deal with. Most frontline people have what I said before is a dark humour. It's not isolated to police. A lot of frontline agencies will laugh at situations or that some people will find offensive, but it's what happens.
Sergeant Bowens, again, without either you or I seeking to justify the use of inappropriate terminology and references, there's a term that's often used in sporting law, that is, what goes on tour stays on tour. Was this sort of terminology that was used in relation to the Nugada Awards used in any of the operations in which you were involved?
Yes, there was a secrecy.
It was sorry?
Private. It was a private matter.
No. Was it used in carrying out police duties?
Oh, no, it was segregated completely for police duties. It had no impact on what we did.
And would it ever have been acceptable?
No. In TAG or in GDs, I think what I said in my statement, the frontline officers of Northern Territory Police are exceptional and perform a great role in the territory.
Their job is to keep the place peaceful.
It's to maintain the peace and to protect lives. And
what percentage of that would you say occurs in the Northern Territory in relation to what we describe as Indigenous people?
it would be over 95%. And it's Indigenous, it's not catching offenders. I've worked as a watch commander. I'm at the radio. It is people calling for help, calling police for help. And we attend.
To move to a different topic, the unfortunate text attributed to you, which held the unfortunate word, an acceptable word, when did that become known to more senior members of the Northern Territory Police Force?
I'm not sure if Sergeant Bowens can know that.
Well,
I
let's
actually know that.
let's see.
I don't know the specifics of who, but I know it was would have been executive and investigative level. Zach's phone was seized shortly after his arrest.
That was in 2019.
And I believe it took close to a year to be interrogated, so it'd be somewhere between 2020. They would have been aware of that text message.
And when was the first time it was drawn to your attention?
That would have been at the commencement of the Coronial in 22, 23.
22. And through that interim period, nobody said a word to you,
No, not at all.
and you were left to carry on your duties as sergeant at the Alice Springs Police Station.
Correct. A sergeant and senior sergeant carrying out watch command.
Now, the last issue I want to deal with relates to what has been described as the plan or the safe plan which encompassed arresting the late Mr. Walker at 5 a.m. one morning, would you tell the coroner your views of the plan as a plan at all and of the acceptability of plans of that nature?
With respect to my objective question, basis that it doesn't answer the statement which dealt with TRG or would, as I understand it, these questions were asked on the last occasion and answered by Ms. Willis.
Two things. One is that this is not restricted to what happened on the last occasion. In fact, Mr. Coleridge himself has asked questions about the text, as an example. So I'm cross-examining a witness who's been called. As it happens, I don't specifically recall him dealing with this on the previous occasion, but I also can't understand Mr. Coleridge's objection to matters which deal with the police conduct in relation to...
I'll allow the question.
Thank you, Your Honour.
Yes, Your Honour, I understand it's late today to bring in this up, but I wasn't given the opportunity to address this previously. There has been much said about a 5 o'clock arrest plan and that it was safe and that my team disobeyed a safe plan, and that thus putting blame on my team. Firstly, let me just give you, to qualify my opinion, I think we know that I am a sergeant with TRG, qualified as the Sierra 1 reporting containment, which is the team leader reporting, also nationally qualified in that role. In that role, I've written up plans, conducted plans, and team-led plans for the security of dignitaries, including President Obama and the royal family, not to mention multi-jurisdictional plans and cordons which have affected the arrest of murderers in the territory. I'm fairly confident that I know what a plan is. I know what isn't a plan. What happened at Unimove was not a plan. And calling something that doesn't exist safe implies that my team had done something wrong. The details of that plan, well, there were actually 3 plans. So we'll talk about the 5 o'clock one. And it's hard to talk about a 5 o'clock plan because I don't believe this court's actually discussed what the plan was actually going to look like. So I don't know it. I don't think anybody else does.
Yes, I'm not going to allow a discourse on limited information that the officer is not aware of. We've heard significant evidence in relation to the plan, the people involved and the decision making at the time, and I won't, even though he may be qualified to give an opinion on the basis of experience, he clearly can't give an opinion on this particular plan, given he's one that would be helpful to me, given the fact that he is not aware of all the information that we have in relation to this incident.
Your Honour.
Well, let me perhaps ask a couple of direct questions and see whether they are acceptable. First of all, I understand that there had been an agreement between members of the Northern Territory Police Force and the community that Mr. Walker would be arrested after a funeral a day later. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Was that information communicated to the members of the team who
Objection.
went.
Yes, he wasn't present, he wasn't there on the day, and we have heard evidence from everyone who was there and have had direct evidence about this, Mr. Sutton.
And for the record, you're on page 5,000 of the transcript and on witnesses examined on these issues of rights defense. So maintain the issue as the right.
Not allowing that question.
No, I've no further questions.
No, Your Honour, I hoped as team leader of the IIT I would have some input in the planning that my team goes through and what's expected of them, and the experience of further plans and what entailed in this plan, which is far removed from what they normally dealt with. So
There's been
I think there's relevance
a
there.
lot of time for evidence to be gathered, statements to be taken.
Not for me though.
You've been represented in these proceedings, Sergeant, and we've received evidence widely from many, many different people, and I will not be receiving any evidence further on this point from the witness box in circumstances where I have had direct evidence from many different people within the police force, directly those on the ground, and also other higher ranking people who have provided opinions on this.
And the OIC of IIT, Your Honour.
I'm sorry, Sergeant, it's not the time now to be introducing fresh evidence.
Just for the record, Your Honour, there are 4 statements on the brief for this witness, and lest it be forgotten, the witness spent 2 years in the Supreme Court fighting not to give evidence in these proceedings. So it is a little rich to suggest that he hasn't been given the opportunity.
I'm not going
Are there
to-
any other
I'm not going
questions?
to respond to that.
Thank you.
attack.
Are there any other
I have
questions?
no
Because
further
there has
questions.
been
You've heard
ample
the
time.
ruling, Sergeant Owens.
I am.
Nothing that you can say.
Anything else, Mr. Coleridge?
You will briefly ask some questions to Mr. Bolton about the sick leave that you have been on for some time.
Yes.
You identified as one of the reasons, and I'm not suggesting that it's the only one, but one of the reasons was, and it is my note, that you were served with some disciplinary charges. Correct? Were you aware that on the brief in this matter there is a text message from Zachary Rolfe to Paul Kirby on the 17th of October 2019, in which Mr. Rolfe complained to Paul Kirby about disciplinary action taken against Mr. Kirby? He said, "Fuck their gay cunts. Yeah, they just find a name and go through over and over. Fuck them, just let them waste their time. And then if they ever have enough evidence, just stress leave until they let it go. Seems what everyone else does."
Reason asked a question.
Well, I object to the statement.
I think it will be relevant to the question whether he's aware that that is the attitudes and behaviour of people within the police service. I'll allow the question. I'm only making an assumption there about what it might be.
Nothing more I can say.
Well, can I say as Senior Counsel Assistant, could I ask Mr Abbott not to make gratuitous, disrespectful remarks at the bar table directed towards the coroner?
I understand from your question that what's been put, that something didn't go to the witness.
It's arisen in the course of his evidence, and the course of his evidence he has been taken to as to how it arises. Yes, Mr. Coleridge.
No, you can go through the question if you like.
Right. Well, you heard the message I just read to you. It finished with the observation by Mr. Rolfe that if they, I assume the PSC, ever have enough evidence, just stress leave until they let it go. Seems what everyone else does. Were you aware in 2019 that officers, including officers under your command in the IRT, held that view about sick leave and disciplinary action?
No, they're two totally different type of things. And if you're relating it to me, the question in my case is completely different.
Were you aware that Commissioner Murphy, the acting current Commissioner of the Northern Territory Police Force, was examined a little over a week ago about a decision he made to demote an officer, and gave as one of his reasons for a decision to rescind the demotion was the fact that, in all honesty, he would have gone on sick leave. That's a quote. Were you aware that that was a perception of members of the executive? That
I'm sure they do have that perception, and it's there are people which do go off on sick leave, and there's also people that kill themselves. And I've had to pick up the bodies, so
those are my questions.
Sergeant Bowens, thank you for the difficult task of coming back and making yourself available to answer further questions. And we do have the full statements that have been provided on the brief of evidence, and they will all be carefully considered. Feel free to go now, but you're also welcome to stay if you want to.
thank you.
As much as we appreciate the welcome to stay, if you'll excuse us, and hopefully we won't have
You're
the
excused.
we won't have the pleasure again.
Well then, I'll miss you, your presence, Mr Sutner, and I'm grateful for the assistance that you and your witness have provided to the inquest.
Thank you.
I don't have access to a clock. My clock is missing. I have no idea what it is.
12, Your Honour.
All right. Maybe we'll take just a 10-minute adjournment, and we'll come back. And I think there are some issues that Mr Abbott has
Your Honour, just
raised.
before we do that, might I ask Mr Abbott, he's indicated that in relation to one particular issue.
Oh, sorry, Sergeant.
Sorry.
You are free to go. You don't have to stay sitting in the witness box.
In relation to one particular issue, which is the production of the remainder of the notes that Mr Rolfe took into evidence, he wishes to be heard for 5 minutes. In my respectful submission, that is appropriate, or it's appropriate that Your Honour might listen to him in relation to that, because it might save time. But there are other legal issues he said he wanted ventilated. Can I ask my learned friend, over the break now in 10 minutes, to at least inform counsel assisting what those legal issues are and how long he intends that they will take, because it is imperative that if at all possible we finish this week and we have had no notification of any such issues.
The other issues are statements we provided, statements of two statements of name, and statements of story, and the third issue is that I'm instructed to see in order to hear the human statute declaration to be motivated determination. So I make that application, noting that my instructions to listen to the and they don't. So I expect 5 minutes.
Thank you. We'll return in 10.